Hello aspirants, today we are starting with North America. Due to recent events in January 2026, North America has become extremely important for prelims and mains of 2026. So we'll have to cover this in somewhat details. So this will be covered in two parts. This is the part 1. First we'll be covering the Caribbean islands. So the Caribbean islands actually lie in the ocean part of US and Venezuela. So we have US in the north, Venezuela in the south, and in between those two land masses there are a series of islands. That is the exact route taken by the US armed forces while they were capturing President Maduro. So automatically these islands become extremely important. So first we have, as soon as we leave the US state of Florida, we come across the Strait of Florida and starts the Greater Antilles or the Big Islands. So in those entire Caribbean islands, these islands are the biggest of them all. That's why they are called the Greater Antilles. What are they? First we have Cuba. Then Cuba, Haiti and Dominican Republic together are called Hispaniola. So if UPSC asks you, which they can this year, is that which two countries are called Hispaniola? It is Haiti and Dominican Republic. Finally, there is Puerto Rico and Jamaica. You see, these islands are big. That's why they are called Greater Antilles. When we leave Puerto Rico over here, after this, what starts is the Lesser Antilles. These are the curved chain from Virgin Islands to Grenada. So just need to remember these two, Virgin Islands and Grenada. Grenada is very close to Venezuela. See, just this piece of land is Venezuela over here. Finally, we have the Lucayan Archipelago, that is the Bahamas. So the Bahamian islands, which are very good for holidays and very good beach resorts, in this map they are present here. These are the Bahamas, very close to the Greater Antilles. The capital is Nassau. So a bit of a history here. During the golden age of piracy, the movie Pirates of the Caribbean, based on things happening around Nassau. So that's where the writers took their influence from and they wrote us this epic. So around Nassau was their activities happening. So it's culturally very significant. I don't think UPSC will be asking about Nassau, but it's interesting to know that an entire movie series is based upon real events around Nassau. Of course, that's all fake, but just letting you know. This is the north-south extension. Now, knowing the north-south extension for every UPSC aspirant is very important. So, if you have to design these islands in north to south, the first will be the Lucayan Archipelago, then comes the Greater Antilles, and then comes the Lesser Antilles. That is north to south. But if you have to draw a route, which I think UPSC asked, then how many states will it take from Nagaland to Kerala? Something like that if they ask even in world geography, then the route from US to Venezuela will be Greater Antilles and Lesser Antilles. You ignore the Lucayan Archipelago there. So after we are done with the Caribbean islands, now let's move on to the North American core. As usual, we'll be looking at the tectonic plates distribution, and as you are seeing in all of these major continents like Australia, Africa and South America, most of the continent is tectonically stable. That's why you never hear of earthquakes, volcanisms in one part of the continent. In North America, that part is the eastern part. The western part is extremely tectonically active. There are 3 plates working, and this is extremely important because the 3 plates gives you the transform plate boundary, they give you the divergent plate boundary, and they give you the constructive plate boundary. So all 3 kinds of plate boundaries are present in the western coast of North America. Let's see how. 3 important plates are Juan de Fuca plate, the Pacific plate, and the North American plate. Okay, so let's just focus on the North American plate. It's pretty much stable. It is lying here. Everything is happening here. The eastern portion is fine. Nothing is happening over there. So we have the Juan de Fuca plate. It is a remnant of a major plate which has completely subsided and only this much is remaining. Juan de Fuca plate and the North American plate are going through a collision course. What is happening over here is a destructive plate boundary and an ocean continent collision. We are just focusing on Juan de Fuca and North American. So ocean continent collision is taking place. What will happen in ocean continent collision? Number one, volcanoes will form. Number two, young fold mountains will form. And there will be massive amounts of earthquakes as well. So that is Juan de Fuca and North American. Now, let's go for North American and Pacific. What is happening here? The North American plate and the Pacific plate are seeing a transform boundary. They are sliding past each other. Pacific plate is going up like this and North American plate is going down. Its relative motion is going down. It is basically a stable plate. But the Pacific plate is moving up. So this becomes a transform boundary. And this is also famous for the San Andreas Fault, a major fault line and responsible for almost all the kinds of different mountainous regions you come across in the California region of North America. Finally, the third is the Pacific and the Juan de Fuca plate. Usually books do not focus on the Pacific and Juan de Fuca plate, but we have to. Over here. Now you see Pacific plate versus Juan de Fuca plate. So this is, as you will be seeing in this diagram, it seems that they are also going through a transform plate boundary. They're sliding past each other, but that is not the case. This is where the constructive plate boundary starts, like the African Rift Valley. So what is happening here? In such regions of the Juan de Fuca, there is the Juan de Fuca ridge, then there is the Explorer ridge. These ridges are coming up because the Juan de Fuca plate is going here, but the Pacific plate is going here. So there is a transform boundary over here, but a constructive plate boundary is occurring in this direction. So ridges are being formed. So we have the constructive plate boundary here, Juan de Fuca versus Pacific. We have the destructive plate boundary in Juan de Fuca versus North American, and the transform plate boundary in Pacific and the North American plates. The Pacific and the, so we have Pacific and Juan de Fuca giving us the constructive plate boundary. Why is it constructive plate boundary? Because a new plate is getting constructed. However, there are many analysts who say that this plate gets formed and then it goes inside the North American plate. Next we have is the Pacific versus GDF. Then we have the North American plate versus Juan de Fuca. What is happening here? Juan de Fuca is getting inside, it is subducting under the North American plate. So that gives us destructive plate margin. And destructive plate margin means it is an ocean continent collision. And by now you know that what forms an ocean continent collision. Finally, we have the North American plate versus the Pacific plate. That gives us the transform plate boundary. Okay, so we have everything happening here, all three kinds of plates. Now, Western mountain system, the North American Cordillera. So we know that new plates are being formed in Juan de Fuca and Pacific. Whatever is being formed gets subducted inside the North American plate, forming the Cascade Ranges. Okay, so what we have first is the Coast Range. Okay, we'll study the Coast Range first. coast range is somewhere here, and this is exactly where the Juan de Fuca is subducting inside the North American plate. We are getting the coast range here. These are the young fold mountains. There are also block mountains. How? I will explain to you later. Now, below this we have the Sierra Nevada and the Cascades. So Cascades are volcanic ranges mostly, and Sierra Nevada are also block mountain ranges. So Sierra Nevada are block mountains while Cascade are volcanic in nature. Now, why is this ocean continent collision between Juan de Fuca and North American plate giving us completely volcanic mountain ranges? Why is it not mentioned that it is also young fold mountains like the Andes? So basically the difference here lies in what dominates the region. When Juan de Fuca is subducting inside the North American plate, what dominates are volcanoes. So Cascade Range is full of volcanoes, and there are hill peaks as well like young fold mountains, but because volcanoes are so many in number, this has earned the name of a volcanic range and not a young fold mountain range. So remember, Cascade ranges are volcanic in nature. Okay. Coast ranges, why is it young fold mountains and block mountains both? Let's go back. So coast range is forming somewhere over here up north, where the main action of Juan de Fuca and North American plate is taking place. So the problem here is that the plates are not, it does not really happen in a textbook term. There are areas where there is a constructive plate boundary as well. You see, there is a constructive plate boundary here, there is a constructive plate boundary here, and that's because of the Pacific plate. So whatever we read in textbooks, we are reading in a perfectly aligned manner, that there is a thin line, there is a perfectly separated line, and along that line trenches are being formed, or new young fold mountains are being formed, or island arcs are being formed, but in reality it does not happen that clearly. And Juan de Fuca plate is such a plate with so many disturbances, so many different areas going through different activities. Like one part of it is going with a constructive plate boundary over here. This is the same plate, one plate Juan de Fuca, having a constructive boundary with North America, then having a transform boundary with the part of Pacific, and having a constructive plate boundary with the same plate Pacific Ocean over here. So you see this one plate, so it is not so clear that it is not so clear as given in textbooks, especially with a plate like the Juan de Fuca plate. A part of it goes through destructive, a part of it goes through constructive, different things are happening. So we have the coast range as a part of it is a young fold mountains as well, and a part of it is fold mountains as well as block mountains as well. Then we have the Rocky Mountains, which are young fold mountains. Sierra Nevada is a perfectly block mountain. Here is the Sierra Nevada, and this has Sierra Nevada is over here, and this has gone through the same things which I have just explained to you. So Sierra Nevada, there is was a constructive plate boundary here, and because of this, the parts of the land masses just shifted up, like the Horst and the Graben, which we had studied in block mountain formation. So a part of it was forced up and a part of it was forced down, resulting in the formation of Sierra Nevada ranges. After this, after studying the Western Cordillera, we are going towards the intermontane plateau. Intermontane plateaus are those that are lying between two hill ranges. So over here we have the Colorado Plateau. It is important because this has the famous Yellowstone National Park and others. This is the Grand Canyon. And there is the Great Basin Plateau. These are the intermontane plateaus between Sierra Nevada and the Rocky Mountains. So I haven't explained to you how Rocky Mountains were formed. Rocky Mountains were formed back in the day and they are still considered young fold mountains. Today, because it is over the top of a very stable North American plate, so nothing much happens. It is as it is, but it is very recent. So it should be clear to you that things in the western part of North America are happening in a highly tectonically unstable manner. There are a lot of things happening in a limited amount of time. So Rocky Mountains were formed, then we had the Sierra Nevada, then we have the Sierra Madre, then we have the Cascade Ranges, then we have the Coast Ranges. So many things are happening over there because all three are present: transform boundary, destructive and constructive plate boundaries. Finally, we have the Eastern Highlands. Eastern Highlands are nothing but the Appalachian Mountains. So Appalachian Mountains are a very stable block of land. They were present long time back, were extremely millions of years back. They were tectonically active, but today they are just a pair of old tectonic belt, and not much is happening over there. So you need to remember Eastern Highlands is just Appalachian Mountains. I would like you to have a look at the Canadian Shield now. In a lecture in Africa, we had studied about cratons. We had studied about how a part of the craton gets exposed and how those rocks are extremely hard to move. They have been in the same place, in the same position for such a long period of time that they have become extremely hardened. Same happens over here. The Canadian Shield. So this region of Canada is an oldest geographic core of North America, and that's why the North Atlantic Shield does not have um, much young fold mountains and other hilly areas where it is deep red. The rest of the regions over here, it will always be green because this is the region which is newly being formed and very new things are happening here, and the Rocky Mountains are done over here. After this, everything just remains extremely stable. Nothing much is going to happen. Next, we are getting into the rivers and drainage. So rivers and drainage, there are very limited rivers which we need to focus on. First is the Mississippi. So Mississippi has an Atlantic drainage and same goes for St. Lawrence. Mississippi has a huge basin. Look at the basin of this. It almost drains the entire, at least the United States, all the rivers drain into the Mississippi. It seems like that. And where does it? All you need to remember is the origin and the mouth. Origin is Lake Itasca in Minnesota, somewhere here, and it drains in the Gulf of Mexico, close to New Orleans. Three important rivers are Missouri, Ohio, and the Red River. So Missouri, all three are the right bank tributaries of Mississippi. Why is it the right bank tributary? Which direction will be the right bank tributary of Mississippi? This is the Mississippi flowing around over here. Right bank tributary will be in this direction. So you will find the Missouri River, the Ohio River is somewhere in between, and also the Red River is over here. All of these rivers have their sources close to the Rocky Mountains and other highlands present in this region. So all of these rivers are in the right hand tributaries of Mississippi. Another Atlantic drainage important river is the St. Lawrence River. It's originating from Lake Ontario, and the major tributaries are Ottawa and Saguenay. So this river is actually which connects all the Great Lakes to the Atlantic Ocean. We will be studying lakes soon. So all of these lakes are somehow connected to the Atlantic Ocean because of St. Lawrence River. It is a very, very wide river. And because of this has become extremely navigable as well. Now, when we study about river navigation, it becomes extremely important for UPSC because India is also considering waterways. Remember, we had a time period which was all over the news when national waterways was there. So same, waterways is extremely important for internal transport and internal businesses. That's why St. Lawrence River comes into place. All of the Great Lakes are connected to the big cities, like St. Lawrence River is connected to Quebec, Montreal, Toronto. Then when you enter Lake Ontario, you get to Toronto, you get to Detroit, you get to Gary, Chicago, Milwaukee, all the main, all the very important cities of North America are connected to the St. Lawrence River, which is connected to the Atlantic Ocean. Hence, it becomes very important. It is connecting the hinterland, the inland areas of US and Canada. Now, we are going towards the Arctic drainage. Okay, but there's one more river, the Rio Grande River. This is important because it forms the boundary between US and Mexico. I am focusing on US and Mexico as well because we don't know what will happen in the future. Currently, things are not looking peaceful. So, we have the Rio Grande River somewhere here, and this forms the political boundary between US and Mexico, the Rio Grande River. That's all you need to know about the Rio Grande. Arctic Ocean has one very important river, the Mackenzie. Mackenzie River is important as it brings the salt lakes, the lakes of Canada is connected to the ocean. You see, from the Great Slave Lake, Mackenzie River starts, and it is connected to the Great Bear Lake as well, and it flows and into the Arctic Ocean. That's how it is important. So, and Great Slave Lake is also connected to Lake Athabasca, which is connected to another lake over here. So the system of lakes are present, which connects the internal regions and makes it navigable. It makes it open to the ocean and hence to trade and commerce. Now, Pacific drainage. So there is one Yukon basin, the Yukon River in Canada, in Alaska. Starts in Canada, moves and flows into the Bering Sea. And the other is the Colorado River again. Colorado River is important because of Gulf of California and because of the Grand Canyon. It has formed the Grand Canyon, as many analysts say. Now, the Great Lakes. Now, this is something which the UPSC will love if they want to give you some questions about from North America. So, you need to know these are some facts that Lake Superior, largest freshwater lake and deepest of the Great Lakes. I'm not going to show over this because you will be getting the slides as well. What I want to focus on how these lakes are connected to the Atlantic Ocean, because this gives us the question, this answers the question as to how the hinterland of North America is so rich. This is the reason why they are so rich. They are landlocked in a way, but they are still connected to the ocean. Why? Because of the Great Lakes and how they're connected to the Atlantic Ocean. So Lake Superior over here. Lake Superior along with the St. Mary's River, this is the St. Mary's River, is connected to Lake Huron. So this Lake Huron is entire one lake. These are not two different lakes. This is one full lake, Lake Huron. Then Lake Michigan is here. Over here is the city of Gary, an industrial city, and over here is the city of Chicago. So Lake Michigan is also connected to Lake Huron through Strait of Mackinac. Here is a strait here. It is missing in this map. Strait of Mackinac is present here. Now, so Superior and Michigan are connected to Huron through St. Mary's River and the Strait of Mackinac. Now, Huron is connected to Lake Erie through the St. Clair River. Connects to the St. Clair Lake. This is the St. Clair Lake. And St. Clair Lake is related to Detroit River, which is connected to Lake Erie. So, Detroit River is also the car manufacturing hub of North America. That's how it's important. And Lake Erie is connected to Lake Ontario through Niagara Falls and the Niagara River. Now, one trick to remember these rivers is that most of them start with Saint. St. Mary's connecting Lake Superior to Lake Huron. St. Clair connecting Lake Huron to Lake Erie. St. Clair Lake. St. Clair Lake is not a part of the Great Lakes system because it is too shallow and too small to be a part of the Great Lakes. Great Lakes is formed only of homes. Another trick to remember this name is homes. Huron, Ontario, Michigan, Erie, Superior. And Lake, yes, I did not finish it. So Lake Ontario is connected by the St. Lawrence River, which connects to the Atlantic Ocean. So remember this flow, how Lake Superior along with all the lakes is connected to the Atlantic Ocean. Remember, and how do we remember all the names? Homes. Other Great Lakes of US and Canada. First, we have the Great Bear Lake. Largest lake of Canada, drains into the Mackenzie. Lake Winnipeg drains into Nelson River, Hudson Bay. So all of these lakes are somehow connected to the ocean. Great Slave Lake, again over here, connected to the Arctic Ocean and through the Mackenzie River. And finally, we have the Great Salt Lake. So all of the, even Lake Athabasca over here is somehow connected to the Great Slave Lake, which goes far ahead and goes into the Arctic Ocean. Great Salt Lake is one salt lake, it's a very saline lake that is present in the state of Utah. It is a remnant of an ancient lake, Bonneville, and because this lake is not connected through rivers or through any other lake, this has become an extremely saline lake. Now, Lake Athabasca is present here. This diagram is for you to solve and for you to think as well. Now, if you can identify which are what lakes. Great Bear, there is Great Bear Lake, Great Slave Lake, there is Lake Athabasca. Winnipeg is given over here already, along with homes are present over here. So you can take a moment and identify which are what lakes. What I want you to think about after this is how these lakes seem to be in a line. If you draw a line over here, this connects. And this is around the same as the Canadian Shield. So when actually glaciation was happening, when the ice age ended and the glaciers were moving past and new crevices of those glaciers were opening up, then water was flowing into and forming these lakes. That's why they form like a boundary of the Great Canadian Shield and the rest of the North America. Of course, Great Canadian Shield is most of Canada and also enters over here, but you are getting the point. All of the lakes seem to be in one single line, like they were part of something monumental back in the past. Now let's get into natural vegetation. We'll just be covering two: prairies, grasslands, and deserts. So prairies, as you know, they are temperate grasslands. There are almost no tropical grasslands in North America. Remember that. What we have is natural vegetation of prairies. Now in this map here, there are different kinds of prairies given. You don't have to know them. Just remember they are prairies, just temperate grasslands. Why temperate grasslands? Because they are far up north, beyond 40-45 degrees north. And they are rain shadow areas of Rockies, moderate rainfall. So even they do not get enough rains, then grasses happen, along with deserts, which we'll be covering soon. Important for you is match the following. Prairies are in North America, pampas are in South America, steppes are in Eurasia, and veld is in Africa. We did not cover veld in Africa because it is in South Africa and an extremely small portion. Do not have to cover that. All you need to know is it is the same thing, temperate grassland. What region calls it by what name? Match the following. Now desert. So we have four important deserts in North America. There is the Great Basin Desert, the Mojave Desert, Sonoran Desert, Chihuahua Desert. And guess what? The Great Basin Desert is a cold desert. The rest are hot deserts. How were they formed? In all of our geography classes, we have learned that deserts are formed by two major things. Number one is cold ocean current, and number two is falling between 30-35 degrees north and south of the equator, where it is the falling cell of Hadley. Hadley cells falling air packets. But formation of these deserts is very simple. It is just because they are on the leeward side of Sierra Nevada and the Rocky Mountains. This is the most important region for the formation of these deserts. Now, whenever there is rainfall trying to come into the hinterland of North America, they come across first the coast range, then the Sierra Nevada. After that, hardly anything is left. So the Great Basin is formed. And you can look at the altitude, it is way up the sea level, and thus it is a cold desert. Second is the other three deserts. You see, on the other side of the Rockies, once they are reaching Rockies, when they're reaching Rockies also, they have to come across so many ranges. So once they reach Rockies, then they fall down in the rain shadow area of Rockies and desert, and there is hardly any moisture left. The other is continentality from the oceans. This is a separate reason. And the other two are obviously high pressure belts and cold current, which you have learned a lot. Which cold current is flowing here? It is the California current, flows north to south, and the falling belt of the Hadley cell, both of them together further create a high pressure, and because of the rainfall as it is very hard in the western part of North America. But whenever this happens, again the continentality and the fact that it is on the leeward side of so many mountain ranges brings it hardly any rainfall. Seas, there are four important seas over here. When we are studying seas, I am not talking about gulfs. When I am talking about gulfs, I am not talking about seas and straits. When I am talking about straits, I am not talking about the other two. Today, now, I am talking about seas. So, what seas do we have? We have the Caribbean Sea first. Caribbean Sea is what connects Atlantic and the Gulf of Mexico. Atlantic and the Gulf of Mexico is connected by the Caribbean Sea. And after this, we have the Bering Sea. Bering Sea is in Alaska and Russia, and is supposed to be good for rich fishing grounds, not cold and hot water currents. There are other reasons also as to why rich fishing grounds can form. This is because of basically upwelling of water. I haven't gotten into the research of why upwelling happens here, but this has become a very rich fishing ground because of upwelling. You know what upwelling is? Upwelling is that when, for some reason, water from below the ocean bottom, it comes up, and when it comes up, it brings in different kinds of minerals, thus increasing the phytoplankton and makes it a rich fishing ground. Then you have the Labrador Sea, very important because of Greenland. And finally, we have the Beaufort Sea. This is mostly frozen for most part of the year, but it still is a sea. It's part of the Arctic Ocean. Now we are talking about Gulf. So we have the Gulf of Mexico. Gulf of Mexico is surrounded by US, Mexico and Cuba. Gulf of Mexico is surrounded by not just Mexico and US, Cuba is also present. Remember, Cuba. Gulf of California, however, is completely within Mexico. US does not get access to the Gulf of California. It is located entirely within Mexico. Finally, there is the Hudson Bay. So Hudson Bay is located entirely within Canada and receives the Nelson River. Over here, there's Port Nelson. So we have a Hudson Bay, but there is Gulf of Mexico and Gulf of California. So what's the difference between Gulf and a bay? Gulf is a huge piece of water body, and it has a very narrow opening to for the water to get out. It is surrounded on land by almost all sides, and it is navigable. Waters are very deep. That's why we have Gulf. Now, Gulf of Mexico, you see only this much and this much is what is available for others to, for the water to flow in and flow out, almost surrounded by water from all sides, by land from all sides. Very deep and extremely navigable. Gulf of California, surrounded by land from all sides, very deep and navigable, and a very small opening for ships and vessels to enter. Hudson Bay. Now, bay is a smaller jutting of water. That's how we have the Bay of Bengal as well. Not very deep, navigable though, not very deep, and wide opening. So we have a huge opening over here, almost the same size as the Hudson Bay. So easily navigable, and but gulfs have a very narrow opening, just this much and over here, just these two. Now straits. So there is, most important is the Bering Strait, separating Russia and the US. In fact, Asia and North America through the Bering Strait. Close to the Bering Sea is the Bering Strait. Then Greenland and Canada is separated by the Davis Strait. There is this island here called the Baffin Island. Both Greenland and Baffin Island are separated by the Davis Strait. State of Florida, as I had explained, between Cuba and United States, these are the Greater Antilles. Finally, the Hudson Strait, connecting the Hudson Bay to the Atlantic Ocean, or the Labrador Sea is present here. Finally, we are looking at some islands now, Pacific Islands and Atlantic Islands. So these two are basically the Pacific Islands. Which are they? The Aleutian Islands. They are, now Alaska is over here. So when you go beyond Alaska, you come across the Aleutian Islands, and they almost enter into Russia as well. Russia and North America are separated by the Bering Strait and the Bering Sea. So Bering Sea is there, Bering Strait is also present. This is the international dateline. There is also the Vancouver Island. Now Vancouver is an island. It is a famous city in Canada. It is an island. It is not a part of the mainland Canada. The Atlantic Islands, we have the Grand Banks, of course, very famous and very much liked by UPSC, separated by Gulf of St. Lawrence. And other is the Prince Edward Island. It is also in Canada, and it is present close to the other island, the Labrador Island, Newfoundland Labrador Islands. Now, why are we entering into islands? It's because of this. Once we are studying Greenland, it is important for us to also cover other islands. So we got rid of those few islands, Pacific Islands and the Atlantic Islands. Now we are entering into the big thing, Greenland. Unfortunately, Greenland has also recently become extremely important, making lives harder for UPSC aspirants day in and day out. Few facts for you to remember about Greenland is, number one, it is the world's largest island. It is geographically a part of North America, but it is an autonomous territory of Denmark. That's why it is called by a different name. Starts with a K. Kalalit Nonat. Now, it is not a continent. Remember this. It might look huge, big in a flat atlas, but in a globe, you know, it is not very small, but it is quite small. The world's largest island, its capital is Nuuk over here. And now some things which are important, 80% covered by ice sheet. Ice thickens around 3 kilometers in some places. So the fatness, the thickness of the ice goes to almost 3 kilometers within Greenland. Why this is important is because in the next lecture, I will be telling you what happens when that happens to the continental crust. Yes, it changes the crust as well. It makes it bend somewhat like this. So most Greenland does not have forests. Now UPSC might give a statement that Greenland does not have forests. Okay, that's a false statement. Greenland does have forest, just one. There is something called as Kingwa Valley in southern tip, and it is really south, somewhere here. So just this region has some forest areas. In fact, willow trees are also there. So many cricketers in the audience will know willow is very important for making cricket bats, and those are huge trees. Even those are present in Greenland. This might become a trick question that there are forests present in Greenland, but only in the southern tip, Kingwa Valley. Another thing important for Greenland is the seas of Greenland. Now, seas around Greenland are, let's start. Now we cannot just study, okay? Greenland Sea, okay, Greenland will have a Greenland Sea. It is kind of between Norway, that is Svalbard, between Norway and Greenland is the Greenland Sea. Okay, now we come south. Then there's the Denmark Strait. Why Denmark Strait? Greenland is an autonomous part of Denmark. So Greenland and Iceland, between them is the Denmark Strait. Now we come to the Labrador Sea. As we had read earlier, for the Labrador Sea, we've had Greenland and Canada is separated by the Labrador Sea. Now start moving north from the other side, from the Canadian side. We have the Davis Strait. Davis Strait separates the Baffin Island from Greenland. Moving up north, Baffin Bay. Why is this a bay? Huge opening and an enclosed body of water, but not that enclosed. And by it says bay, so I am guessing that it's not as deep as well as a gulf. Okay, now we have there is one canal basin over here, but the Nares Strait separates Ellesmere Island with Greenland. Ellesmere Island. Now you will be given two options: Baffin Island or the Ellesmere Island. Remember, the Ellesmere Island is the closest landmass of Canada to Greenland. You can see it in the map. Baffin Island is far away from Greenland, and the mainland Canada is really far away. What we have is Ellesmere Island, a part of Canada that is closest to Greenland, separated by the Nares Strait. So how is Canada connected to Greenland? Yes, we have to cover all of this. Let's just get this down with. This is the last slide. Okay, first from Canada we are moving towards Greenland. Okay, first we have the largest island of Canada, the Baffin Island over here. From Baffin Island we move up north, we get the largest uninhabited island in the world. Oh, sorry, I did not write the name over here. It is the I think the Davis Island. Over here, this one. And we have the Ellesmere Island over here, the closest island to Greenland. Finally, these set of islands, along with the Davis Island and the Ellesmere Island, is called the Queen Elizabeth Islands. Now remember, Canada is also not completely free. It is it believes in the monarchy system of UK. It considers the King of UK as its own king. So we have a huge influence of the British monarchy over here. Queen Elizabeth Islands are here. Something happened in 1953 which led to the naming of Queen Elizabeth Islands. This one. Now I am just covering all ground so that if anything comes, you are able to answer it. This island is actually the Queen Victoria Island. Why am I saying this? Because this is quite huge for UPSC to not look at it. This is the Queen Victoria Island. Remember, Queen Victoria Island is over here, and these islands up north are the group of Queen Elizabeth Islands. Ellesmere Island and the Davis Island are a part of Queen Elizabeth Islands, and they are closest to Greenland, not Baffin. Ellesmere Island is closest to Greenland. So that will cover up most of the Greenland, and if I come across something, then I will make a separate video on Greenland altogether. As it is, I'm thinking of making a separate video on the Arctic Ocean and everything that lies around. So that would cover a lot of things as it is. in the second part, we are left with the Latin American countries, which are a part of North America connected to the Colombia of South America. That we will cover. We will be covering what happens in Greenland when the 3 kilometer ice sheet it goes down. There are a lot of fjords in Greenland. Now, fjords question was also asked with Finland in last year. Now, because that question was asked, so I will be covering how fjords are formed as well. It will be mostly be a physical geography with something like Latin American, whatever we have mixed. Political geography of North America will also be covered in the second part of this lecture. Thank you.